Mustafa Chom is hitting the portal, but what does it mean for UCF and for college basketball?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every single day. We're talking UCF basketball today. Portal news is breaking on a guy that we just did an episode on, and we got some updates here. We're going to talk about that, any controversy surrounding that, and what UCF saw coming. Let's start with the news. Mustafa Chom is hitting the portal, Andrew. The UCF freshman has decided to move on. We talked about this kind of with the recruitment of John Bowl coming in. A lot of people were excited about the idea of the Twin Towers and having these guys on the court together. You know, we compared them to the Michigan crew and how they might function. But Mustafa is out now. Because not only are we associates, but we're also friends. So we talked about this off camera that I knew some things were going on there with Mustafa Chom possibly hitting the portal. Was uncomfortable reporting it at that time, but now it has become official. 10 points, 6 rebounds per game for the true freshman, 7'2", 235 pounds. Let's start with what this means for UCF losing Mustafa Chom. You know, when you're trying to build a program, keeping kids in the program and developing those kids in your system is important. I think this is a pretty big loss for Johnny Dawkins.
Yeah, it's kind of like Baylor. You know, Baylor also lost basically their entire team. UCF outside of a couple of just guys who sit at the bottom end of the bench, they lost their entire team. So I mean, you're hitting a hard reset on this program. Again, this is not the first time UCF has basically had to hit the reset button. It's happened quite often. This is what the transfer portal and NIL have done. Is basically turned everything into 1 year, hit or miss. And let's see what you can get. Problem is, UCF doesn't have that kind of cash to chase after these blue chip guys or even guys that develop into highly sought after transfers. We saw that with, players like Keyshawn Hall, who went to Auburn. UCF, doesn't have $800,000-$900,000 lying around to throw at one player. They may have to spread that amongst 2, 3, 4 players. So they don't have the kind of coin to run with the big boys. We're also, UCF's not on a full Big 12 payout yet. They're still on a partial payout. They'll get a full payout next year. So they'll start having more resources. Of course, by this point next year, if everything goes well, we'll be on the new system after the House settlement is finalized. Obviously, still working on that, not fully approved, but it's a work in progress. And you're seeing a lot of front end stuff going into the portal, and I think that actually played into the whole Mustafa Chom story, and we'll get into that.
Yeah, look, 6.4 rebounds per game. UCF was 6th in the Big 12 in rebounding at 36 rebounds per game. You lose 16% of your rebounding with Mustafa Chom hitting the portal and presumably not coming back. So this is a loss, and you need to be able to rebound. At times we saw UCF get out rebounded, especially on the offensive boards, and it really hurt them in games this year. So again, I think this is a big loss. If they could have held on to him, pairing him with John Bowl might have given you some flexibility. But going back to his decision to hit the portal and in the state of college basketball, re-recruiting your roster has become such a big part of the game that it's become a detriment to the schools that don't have the money. These schools that don't have the money, they're going to become farm leagues for the schools with the money. So what's going to happen? Some kid comes to UCF, gets the tape, blows up, and then hits the open market, Andrew, looking for more money and more highlight in the high life, right? Like,
yeah, ching.
That's what it's become, right?
I mean, everyone wants to leverage their ability to make some money. I get it. I mean, okay. But the truth is, players at the end of the day are going to look at what's best for them. Most of these guys will never be professional. And as a result, they're going to do whatever they can to maximize their value. And a lot of times that's out kicking their coverage. I mean, we saw that with the Nico Amaliva, situation where, they tried to negotiate more money. It backfired and they just settled on, I think it's around $2 million at UCLA when they were supposed to make more at Tennessee on a multi-year deal. So these guys, it's basically the pro lights. Now it's NBA light, NFL light in college football. It's no different. These players are going to leverage for whatever they can get because 95 to 98% of them will not play, professional in the United States, if at all. So get what you get. But I mean, the problem is, until we get this new system set up, there's still a lot of dark side to this NIL recruiting thing.
There is a dark side to it, but it's the game, right? Players wanted to get paid, and with that comes some pro type problems for these college programs. So Mustafa Chom, again, we're going to talk about it in the next segment, but the other problem I think that college athletics has are the people behind the players driving some of these decisions. Now, this is not that dissimilar from when a player is getting ready to turn pro. There's always somebody in his ear telling them, well, you got a chance to go back to school, but if you go pro and you let me represent you, I can get you more money, right? And so many times throughout the years, from my time early on as a student at Auburn, that I see guys make the mistake of listening to these people, and it didn't work out for them in the end. They entered the draft, didn't get drafted, got left out in the cold, essentially. And if they'd gone back to school for one more year or stayed where they were at, things may have worked out for them. So this is the new college athletics. We've got to deal with it. It's going to be really important. You were among the first to report, Andrew, on the reorganization of the kingdom and its dissolution into the Competitive Success Fund. How important now is this fund? Like you've got an $18 million. You got a $20.5 million coffer you have to fill. 2.5 goes to cover the 74 scholarships, and of that, you've got 18 left to play with. How important now is filling that $18 million coffer? I think this kind of understates that if you don't have enough in that fund to combat people coming after your players, you might be screwed.
Yeah, and here's the truth. UCF doesn't have $18 million in that coffer.
Yeah.
And they won't. They're just, it's not a big enough fan base. It's not as developed as some of the others. It's one of the youngest the average alumni is under 40 years old. This is still a very young, fan base and alumni base that's still growing.
Which is awesome, by the way.
It's
fan base.
This school started in 1963 compared to all these other, century plus old schools. So, it takes time to build that generational wealth. It's not there. And you're seeing it, UCF's not going to be able to compete with the Auburns, the Alabamas, the Ohio States, and Michigans. They're not going to compete with that. They're going to be on the second tier. And the truth is, right now they're still competing with top end American teams like Memphis. They're still competing with that kind of level, with maybe a half step above, just because they have a better conference attached to them. But from a resource standpoint, I mean, Memphis has much better resources for basketball than UCF does. Not even close. UCF basketball has been, from a financial resource standpoint, has been subpar for as long as I've been associated with the school, and that's 25 years. So they've always been a substandard, supported financially program, and that hasn't changed. I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. It's still going to be subpar compared to their peers in their conference. They're going to be focusing on football, and they've got a lot of, ambitious plans to build up facilities and other things. So that's where the money's going. But again, you're not going to see them going in a bidding war against a Kansas or even a Texas Tech for players. There's just too much money elsewhere that those programs are bringing in that UCF just doesn't have access to yet. give it 20, 30 years, they may have access to that kind of money, but it won't be anytime soon that they're going to be filling up, $20.5 million worth of competitive success funds on an annual basis. Because remember, that 20.5 is going to increase every year. So that target is a moving target. It's always going to be skewing up. So yeah, Ohio State's going to fill that, no problem. But UCF, not so much.
Yeah, look, it's not just the money, right? It's the actors involved with the money. We're going to talk about that right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. So I love FanDuel because they make it easy to bet, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite prop. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Andrew,
this is a story.
the internet is alive with the Chom portal news. Now, you and I talked about this, as I mentioned at the top of the broadcast. This is not a complete surprise to me. We spoke about this as if he was returning. Did not feel comfortable at the time reporting that he was going to hit the portal. So this news wasn't a surprise to me. But it seems like Chom's commitment is not just about basketball for him. There are some stipulations tied with this. I reported out earlier that I would not be surprised to see Auburn in the mix for Chom's services. A source close to the program reached out to me immediately to fill in some of the details and said that there are some stipulations involved with garnering his commitment that the program is currently uncomfortable with. Without going into too many details, obviously can't reveal my source here. There are people behind the people all the time, right? These kids have people in their ear, and at some point, somebody decided that this kid we're going to be worth some money. So wherever he pops up, I think it's safe to assume that school definitely capitulated to whatever the stipulations were. If you follow UCF, you probably know what those stipulations are. But your thoughts really quickly on kids coming with not just a price tag, but with other baggage. Yeah, with other baggage.
Well, we've seen where you hire a kid, you have to hire his parent or a coach. This is not brand new stuff. Usually it's out of high school that this happens. A high school coach follows the star player to a school and helps direct them to that school as a result. That was before the pay to play really became a mainstay. That was kind of the other way to kind of funnel money to a player is by hiring his high school coach. But now we're starting to see it on a college level where you want a player. Well, you got to take the handler too. And, this is where things are getting dirty. Lots of chatter coming out of UCF's, insiders. It's starting to creep out, into the interwebs out of respect for those reporters, because I view them very highly. I will not give the exact thing, but I will tell you, all you have to do is search Mustafa Chom's name and the story will come up. That's the truth. This is dirty. This is really dirty. And I have not seen a situation, specifically like this, where you have insiders peddling players.
Yeah.
But I can see why, Auburn was interested in Chom as a player. But I could see why they pulled back, because this is dirty, and like, thanks but no thanks. But concerning the actors involved, it doesn't surprise me that Auburn got a call, about this guy. There's connections between the with there's a connection there. There's history.
Yeah. Well, let me clarify some things here for our listeners as well too, right? Like, I think that this whole process raises questions about when the process truly started. Now, again, we heard whispers of Chom to the portal before he hit the portal. The question is, how soon did that process start? Because when you have third-party actors involved, often what happens is they start reaching out to programs to gauge interest because they're acting as agents.
And usually happens during the season.
Yeah,
they quietly start poking around and seeing the interest before the portal ever opens up.
Some programs will take the call. Some programs will not take the call. Some programs will hear what you have to say and say, okay, well, when it's time for that conversation, we can have it, but thanks for the call. For him to have just hit the portal like a few hours ago, and then before we're recording this, a few hours before we're recording this, it is April 16th at 10:06 Eastern right now. But it tells you that this process started probably quite some time ago. And look, man, was it right when the season started? Was it before the season ended? Was it right before the season ended? These are questions, I think, that when these third-party actors get involved, you actually hurt the kid. You do, because once the news starts to get out, nobody wants to be that school that's looked at as tampering.
Yeah, so, and we already know who the school that is supposed to land him is. That's already come out. It looks like the University of Cincinnati, Big 12 rival, is going to be the school that paid the bag to get him and his handler. So that's no secret at this point. I think once that's formally announced, I think the floodgates are going to open. The question is there potential for UCF to take action on this? Yeah. Because once those details come out, I mean, it's bad. You had basically internal tampering, which again, I've never seen it done like this. But of course, we're in a Wild West era. But I think it's good that a school like Auburn pumped the brakes, did not want to get involved with weren't comfortable with the situation.
We're not going to do that. Yeah.
Thanks, but no. So like as you said, they're still interested, but not with the constraints that come with it.
Correct. They're interested.
They want the player. Yeah. They don't want the baggage that comes with the player.
Yeah. I want to clarify that. They're interested in the player. But again, the way some of this was handled, it raises questions about when the process started. So even if you got word that Chom was going to be on the market, so to speak, right? And the stipulations were clear. If he pops up at your school, the assumption is going to be that, I mean, if you remember what happened in the early 2000s with Alabama football players, name was Albert Means. This is
I know this. Yeah, that school almost got the death penalty.
It landed them on probation, and essentially they had a guy that was peddling Albert Means to all these programs. He popped up at Bama. It was like, all right, well, they paid the money, so you're busted. And I like I said, I think that tampering is something we've openly heard coaches complain about. We've had coaches in college sports accuse other coaches directly of tampering.
Well, this just came up with the Imaliva situation. Dan Lanning at Oregon tipped off Josh Heupel at Tennessee.
There you go.
About Nico's father tampering and basically peddling his son to schools while he's still under a multi-year contract, I might add. Crazy. So that story is even worse, where you have a multi-year contract with a program and you're still peddling to other schools. This is why the system has to change. I know the NCAA has been working with Congress trying to get something in place to help give them some teeth. You don't see NFL players in the middle of multi-year deals trying to facilitate with other teams, because that's not allowed. You sign a 4-year contract, you're there for 4 years, unless there is a separation. And you can't just say, oh, I don't want to play there anymore. You have to be cut, or you have to be traded, or something to that effect, or a mutual agreement of separation. You can't just say, I'm going to go over here. No, you signed a contract. You are bound to fulfill the terms of your contract. I would not be surprised if stuff within the college arena evolves to, to maybe potentially make them the athletes employees, which would bound them by these contracts. But I know schools are trying to avoid that for a variety of other reasons. It opens, work, like work practices and all this other stuff. So, I mean, something's got to give here. It's a very dirty system right now. There's a lot of, backdoor dealings and stuff like we're seeing right now with Mustafa Chom, where, you have a handler from inside the school peddling him to other schools while the season's still going on.
Yeah. Look,
it's just absolutely insane of how this is all playing out.
As far as we know, Auburn said thanks, but no thanks. Mustafa Chom is a great player. I think he's going to really help whatever team he goes to. It sucks that all this other stuff becomes a distraction. But if you're UCF, you're not financially prepared to combat this kind of. I'm struggling with the word tampering, but I'm going to use it for lack of a better term, right? Like, there are going to be programs with more resources and, maybe a richer basketball history. They're going to come through and they're going to have their pick. And so you've got to learn from this and see what you can do to combat this in the future, which leads us to our last segment. Did UCF see this coming? Were there signs? Next on Locked On UCF. Did UCF see this coming, Andrew? Would there have been signs? In short, I'm going to start on this one. In short, yes, right? Like when this kind of stuff happens, a lot of times it's not a shock because it was not a shock to me when he hit the portal. So if it wasn't a shock to me, I know that they knew this was a possibility that he was going to hit the portal. They probably had discussions with this kid between the end of the season and now about, hey, what is it going to take to make sure that you return? We've talked repeatedly ad nauseum about re-recruiting your roster every year. Every coach is having to have these conversations at the end of the season to say, look, come back. No matter how good a season you had, there's always going to be somebody trying to get your players. It doesn't matter whether it's basketball or football or baseball. They're coming after your guys. And you've got to have a winning culture, an opportunity to go pro. And you've got to have money now to hold on to your guys. I think that UCF knew at least on some level this was a possibility from the end of the season until now. Did they know if it was a possibility during the season? That's questionable to me. But I think after that season was over, they probably saw this coming.
Well, when you look at the actors involved, I'm pretty sure there was a conversation in-house about, what would it take to keep him? And UCF, obviously, we've talked about their lack of resources. The rumor mill is saying Cincinnati's paying 7 figures for Mustafa Chom. So, UCF doesn't have that kind of cheese, to get him.
Or one player.
Yeah, they don't have that kind of cheese. And, I'm pretty sure the conversation was had, not so much, hometown discount kind of thing, as the team that currently has him, but to understand, like here's an offer, kind of take it or leave it thing. So I had a feeling they had a sense that they already knew. I don't know how much the program, Johnny Dawkins, Terry Mohajir know. I don't know how much they know as far as how deep this goes and how it was done, or what the fallout will be. Could there be legal ramifications here? Because I think there could be. It's not point shaving, in a scandal like that. But I mean, there's some question that can be brought up about integrity of of players, people involved, if contracts were properly fulfilled. You can raise that question. So I don't know what UCF's going to do about it, but they had to have known that something was going on. You don't replace a 7'2", 235-pound guy with a 7'2", 210-pound guy unless you have a feeling that something may be going on. I thought that, we talked about John Bolt just the other day, and we viewed him as kind of a little bit of a development pick. Obviously is not as polished as Chom. Their high school numbers weren't too dissimilar, but Chom obviously had the opportunity in the Big 12 to kind of show his skills. As far as Bull on Ole Miss, a better team. He got buried in the depth chart against the better conference. The SEC had one of the best one of the best years in history for college basketball for a conference. That place was stacked top to bottom.
Yeah, validated in the tournament as well too. I was there for all the rounds. I mean, look, Greg Sankey, every time I ran into him, he was bragging about how many teams made it through to the next round. So you had half the Final Four, you had over half of the Elite Eight, you had more.
You got
than
the
half
national
of the
champion.
Yeah, you got a national champion. I think it was justified there, but look, you lost Keyshawn Hall to your SEC counterpart in Auburn, right? When you have guys who have good seasons now, I'm worried about this, and they should have seen this coming, because again, without the resources, you are going to become a farm league for schools with the money and more opportunity at basketball. What Keyshawn Hall said when he left was, he said, I wanted to be coached by the best in the game. Now, in his mind, that's Bruce Pearl. Right. And, guys made 2 Final Fours in 6 years. So, he is definitely one of the better coaches in college basketball. I don't know if he's the best in the game, but he's certainly up there. And you got to have more success if you're Johnny Dawkins on the court. They can't afford to have the type of seasons that they had last year and hold on to their good players. So you got to hold on to your Keyshawn Halls. You got to hold on to your Mustafa Choms. You got to hold on to your Nivs Mahovskis. These guys can't be walking out the door, Andrew.
Yeah, and Mahovsky left because he wanted playing time. Tyler Hendricks moving west so he can be closer to his brother. I mean, that one, okay, I can understand that.
Right.
His brother plays for the Utah Jazz, so he's going out west. Okay, that's a fair story. But a lot of these guys, they're chasing the bag. They're chasing something. And Mahovsky was playing time. Well, if he stuck around, he probably would have gotten more playing time because he was working his way into the system and was rising up as the season wore on. The truth is, you go where, if you're not happy with the opportunities, I understand you're going to hit the portal, you're going to look for it, but the grass isn't always greener. But in college basketball, because of the way it's designed, anyone can win.
Yeah.
Butler from the Horizon League made the national championship game. And they were one shot away from winning it. And, and the Horizon League, which UCF just got 2 players from Milwaukee. We talked about one the other day. We'll talk about the other one, coming up. It doesn't matter what conference you're from. There's treasures out there. Keyshawn Hall did not come from a big school, coming to UCF. He came from George Mason, who, is not, part of a power conference. So there is a chance for growth, but as you said, retention of players is a challenge. The question is, when UCF gets more money through their affiliation with the Big 12, are they going to invest some of it into their competitive success fund? Because you can't rely strictly on the fans to fund your programs. It's not going to work for younger and smaller programs. You're going to have to find other avenues to get monies. And if UCF has to take a piece of the increase that they're getting as a result of being a member of the Big 12 to, subsidize that and basically invest it into their competitive success fund, that's what they're going to have to find a way to do, because they need the resources in there if they want to be competitive. Otherwise, you just every year you're just hoping that you punch up out of your weight class. And they did it 2 years ago when they were picked last in the Big 12, and they actually did pretty decent. They went to the NIT this year. While they didn't finish as high as the standings as predicted, they made up for it with a strong postseason run in the Crown. So they kind of fulfilled where they were expected to be. But now you got to do it all over again. You got to build a whole new team again. And you don't have a Darius Johnson who holds that glue together. You got yourself a new point guard, and he's one of the guys we haven't talked about yet. But you don't replace a guy who's been there for his entire college career, that easily.
Yeah, it's tough. Again, Mustafa Chom hits the portal. Big loss for UCF, in my opinion, especially with all the other exits they had from the program with kids hitting the portal. Got to hold on to somebody. But look, they went out and they got John Bowl. They've made efforts to mitigate this. I think that Bowl's commitment kind of underscores that they saw this coming. Personally, I know people were excited about the potential Twin Towers. I saw those posts on social media.
I love the idea.
Yeah, it was tough when we were talking about it because I knew it was a possibility this was coming. But, at the end of the day, it's part of the game. Every coach is dealing with it. We're going to be here to talk about it every single time it happens here on Locked On UCF. Joining me today, I want to thank you, Andrew. Before we get out of here, as always, tell people where they can find you.
You can catch me on Twitter or Blue Sky at Statboy Drew. And you can catch my work on The Last Word on College Football, a part of The Last Word on Sports family.
That's it for another great edition of Locked On UCF. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of every day. For your next listen, go check out our friends at Locked On Big 12. They're talking about every team in the Big 12, including the UCF Knights. You can find Locked On Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast, and you can find us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.